President Donald Trump is currently fighting an uphill battle to win re-election in the 2020 presidential race. With less than a month to go until Election Day, President Trump's chances seem to be dwindling as his opponent, former Vice President Joe Biden, is gaining the support of Americans around the country, while President Donald Trump is losing it. However, this isn't an unheard of or even new situation. For as long as there have been elections in United States history, there have been close elections and upsets. In this video, I'm going to be looking back at President Harry Truman's bid for re-election in 1948 and what it takes to upset an American presidential election. In 1948, the Democratic nominee Harry S. Truman beat the Republican nominee in the general election, winning 303 electoral votes and 49.6% of the popular vote. Harry Truman, like President Donald Trump, was also facing a daunting election. They are both the incumbent president running against a well-known politician who had previously run for president, and both lacked the support from a lot of American citizens. They also both had low approval ratings as well, and almost all major news sources were predicting them to lose. However, the path that Truman took towards re-election, though successful, had some very stark differences to the one Trump is currently taking. From the beginning of his journey to re-election, Truman remained confident of his success in the upcoming election. When the American people, the media, and even his own cabinet doubted Truman and had him consider the option of abstaining from running in 1948, he held his ground and declared that he would win in November. Although he had some lapses in faith, such as when he wrote to General Eisenhower in 1947 asking him to run for president as a Democrat and have Truman as his running mate, he nonetheless persevered and never failed to stop working. To achieve his dream, though, he had to overcome several significant obstacles. Several of these were to do with President Truman's own party, the Democratic Party. Ever since Roosevelt had taken office in 1933, the Democratic Party had started transforming from a conservative party with loyal support in the South to a new party that focused on progressive policies and an increase in government spending. Truman, who had grown up in a traditionally conservative state, Missouri, in the late 19th century, was also going through this transformation. However, from the moment he stepped foot into the office upon the death of President Roosevelt, the Democrats felt as though he was a severe disappointment to the party and started turning away from the president. This resulted in a change in the Democratic Party, which would heavily influence the 1948 election, as many were unsure as to what exactly the party stood for. One section of the party were the conservative Southerners, who had grown up as Democrats and idolized American figures such as President Andrew Jackson and General Robert E. Lee. However, many thought that the Democratic Party needed to distance itself more from the conservative base of the party and start focusing on new issues such as civil rights. Although many thought that this is what the Democratic Party should stand for, there were some who thought it needed to go even farther and be even more progressive. This section of the party was made up of liberals, the most notable of which being former Vice President Henry A. Wallace. This deep division in the Democratic Party proved to be troublesome because not one but three candidates from each section of the party emerged as contenders in the 1948 election. Strom Thurmond of the conservative Dixiecrat Party, an offshoot of the Democratic Party, incumbent President Harry S. Truman, who was more moderate, and former Vice President Henry Wallace, who was running to represent the farther left section of the party. Not only did Truman have to fight off these other two opponents, who were looking for the same voters of the party, he also had to find a way to beat Republican nominee Thomas E. Dewey. Dewey, the governor of New York since 1943, had spent the last 4 years learning from his loss of the 1944 election to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and appeared to be a very formidable opponent. So, President Truman faced some very serious threats to his bid for re-election. A deep division on 2 counts in his own party, a very popular and intelligent opponent, and a lack of support from both the American people and his own cabinet. To deal with these issues, Truman decided to step out of his office and hit the road. From June all the way up until Election Day on November 2nd, the president embarked on a whistle-stop tour, traveling by train across the country to persuade undecided voters to vote for him. Instead of solely visiting massive cities like presidential candidates do nowadays, Truman visited neighborhoods and small towns, to form a personal connection with voters who would actually show up and vote for him in November. In total, he traveled 31,000 miles across the nation and delivered 352 speeches. This act of courage and pure determination ended up paying off in November when the people Truman spoke to actually showed up on election day and cast their votes, not for Dewey, Thurman, or Wallace, but for Truman. His journey by train throughout the country is often seen as one of the greatest recoveries of a presidential campaign in a way almost no one would have deemed possible. What makes his win so much more amazing, however, was the newspapers published the night before his win. As many of them still thought that Truman was doomed on election day, they printed early headlines of Dewey's win of the presidency so that they could have their papers ready by morning. But Dewey didn't end up winning, which left us with one of the most iconic photos in American presidential history. A beaming Harry Truman holding up a newspaper from the Chicago Tribune labeled "Dewey Defeats Truman" after just winning the presidency. Although President Donald Trump isn't facing the same exact challenges as Truman did in 1948, he is most certainly fighting an uphill battle. Trump did win the 2016 election after fighting an uphill battle, though in that case, he was an outsider who had everything to prove. However, now, like Truman, the American people have witnessed almost 4 years of a Trump presidency, and he's wondering whether he has a serious shot at this election. He's down in the polls, and support among Americans for him is wavering. Now it's time to see what he'll do to try to save his campaign. It's unlikely that we're going to see Trump embark on a long train tour around the country, visiting rural towns and trying to sway undecided voters, but that doesn't mean that he isn't trying to win. So far, Trump has been doing the exact opposite of what Truman did. Instead of trying to get more people to vote, he's actually trying to suppress the vote by bashing voting by mail, because he knows that a higher voter turnout will only benefit his opponent. The only question now is, will it work?